congratulations on a beautiful album.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed listening to it. So it's been like 4 years since St. Cloud.
Exactly.
Right? And like obviously you've been doing other projects and stuff, but like why 4 years?
It's really organic, you know. I kind of just let the songs come when they come, and then and kind of follow that. When the record's done, then it's time. And I think as I get older, it like feels more natural for me to take a little time. You know, I did do other projects in between, but the Waxahatchee records feel like there's such a it's just like a real release for me to make those records. And I think that I try to make each one obviously like very present, like where I am in my life at that time. And I feel like 4 years is a good like chunk of time to sort of benchmark. So that's sort of just how it comes.
Obviously the story of the last record was about like you being sober, and now you're kind of like down the line with that journey.
Yeah.
Like where did the sort of inspiration come from this time?
It's so convenient for like the media, but then also for the artist to have like a clean cut narrative. And so I 100% embraced that with my last record. Like, this is my sober record. It's really easy for me to say that. And then we can just sort of like go from there. But truth be told, like that it's pretty complex. There's songs about my sobriety. There's songs about codependency and relationships with other addicts. And, you know, that was just a really specific moment that I was trying to snapshot. And so I would say with this one, it's kind of like, it's similar. It's just, I'm further along in that journey. Like the newly sober experience is really specific. It's like your skin is just crawling with anxiety, and you're sort of like having this big turnover internally. And I think, you know, I'll have 6 years of sobriety coming up in June, and I feel like I'm more settled now and more sort of grounded in it. But in that groundedness, there's all kinds of new things coming up. So I kind of am just you know, like spinning off from that place.
I guess there's writing about it, and then touring like without alcohol, I imagine was like a whole separate experience as well.
When you think about what you're doing when you're touring, like the tolls that it sort of takes on your physical, mental, emotional health, it's insane that any of us drink and do drugs when we do that. Like now that as a sober person, I'm like, oh, I kind of have it figured out now. Actually, it's actually quite a bit easier to do this sober, but it was a big change. I mean, I've been making music since I was 14. So that's, you know, 21 years. And I've been touring since I was 16. And I've been doing this as my job for 10 years. Like I've just been doing this for so long, and drinking was so ingrained in that. Like, and that was just the foundation of all of it. Feeling like you're this ringleader of like a room full of people's night out. And so detaching, like from that, or finding a way to do that without, you know, joining in, has been, you know, there's been a learning curve, but ultimately I think it's better. I think the quality of performance is better. And certainly like, you know, my state of mind is better. I obviously think the tortured artist trope is very, there's like romantic elements to it. I certainly have subscribed to it a lot. I found a lot of inspiration in embracing that and like embodying that in my 20s. But these days, I think when I made St. Cloud, I really wanted to prove to myself that I could make a record that wasn't like entirely embodying that. I think I lived my life for a long time, sort of leaning into some chaotic decisions, you know, just so that I would have something interesting to write about. And I think making that record, and maybe one of the reasons why it was a really challenging record to write, is I was really trying to detach from that and still write something that felt authentic to my experience. So yeah, I think in my own journey, I'm trying to put that to bed. I really respect people who find inspiration in that. I understand that like intimately, but yeah, moving forward, I'm trying to sort of be the most untortured artist that you know.
That's great. Right Back to It is so beautiful.
Thank you.
I really love Wednesday, and like Jake felt like such a good partner for that song. But I read that you originally wrote it to sing with Kevin. Like, is that right?
So I wrote Right Back to It. Well, I wrote the melody to Right Back to It years ago. And at the time, I wasn't really writing songs for myself yet. It was kind of in the era where in 2020, I was writing for like, I wrote with Winona Judd. I started working on the Plains record. Like I was doing a bunch of stray songwriting projects. And that's when that melody came up. And so I thought, this might be cool. Like if Kevin and I do a record together, this might be cool. And I think part of it is because it just felt like a unique melody for my songs. Like it wasn't 100% something. It felt new to me. So I kind of set it aside, and I even think I told him that night. You know, I had been out in our studio working. I was like, I think I wrote something cool that we could do, and he was like, cool. You know, and then maybe like a year later, I was on tour, or I guess at this point, maybe a couple of years later, I was on tour with Jason Isbell and Sheryl Crow. And I just had this hot hand with songwriting. I was like pulling up all these old melodies and putting lyrics to it and finishing those songs. And so I pulled that one up when we were on tour, wrote all the lyrics out, and was really excited and was like, no, this is going to be a song for me, I think. You know, it just, the way that it wrote, it didn't feel like a duet. It felt like a single perspective. But of course, because Kevin was in my mind, I was like, this song is about Kevin. It's like a love song for Kevin. So then we decided that, I hope it's okay if I tell this whole long story.
Definitely.
Okay, great. So then when I was getting ready to make the record, Brad Cook and I were talking about what we were going to do. And we didn't really have any like clean cut ideas of what making the record was going to look like yet. But I had seen MJ Lenderman at South by Southwest, and I had never even heard of Wednesday or MJ or any of that whole scene yet. But I saw him because my sister Allison and Brad like sent me to go see him. And very quickly I was like, well, this is like my favorite music I've ever seen. Like I was all in from like moment one. So to Brad, I had said, maybe we could bring in Jake. And then Brad invited Jake to the first demo session, and it just went so well. And it really kind of put us on our path. And the last thing Jake did, he had sung on some songs with me, and I was just like obsessed. I was like, our two voices together sound so good, and everything's like really clicking into place. And Right Back to It was the song that, as the group, we were like the most excited about. Like that song, the demo of it feels very much like what you hear now. And so right before we left, Brad was like, Jake, why don't you sing a harmony on this? And, you know, I like coached him through it, and I was like, here's what you're going to do. And he was so polite, and he was just like, that's great. I got it. And then he went in and he sang a completely different thing, but it's so good. And it's exactly what you hear on the record. And as soon as we heard that, it was just like everything completely like came into focus for Brad and I. So, yeah, I just felt like I have to, you know, I got to keep Jake on this song. Like he kind of like in a way really made the song what it is. So when we shot that video, there's a couple parts early on when we were shooting it that I was like, people are going to think this is a green screen, but it's not. It's at Caddo Lake in East Texas. So it's this beautiful lake that's right on the border of Texas and Louisiana. It's kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. And we just took one day to shoot it. And so I spent like the majority of the day, like just me and Jake on a pontoon boat, and then everyone else on another pontoon boat, like shooting us. And it was so fun. We just had a blast. I don't think he'd ever driven a boat before. So he was like, you know, he was loving driving the boat. we just had a really good time with it. But yeah, it's very surreal, very beautiful. The guys who shot the video, I told them I just want it to be on a pontoon boat. And then they came in very hot with the location. They were like, oh, we know exactly where to shoot this. So Jake and I were on the boat, and he was driving, and I hadn't even thought of this, but I looked over to him and I was like, how long do you think it's going to take somebody to make a "you have bought yourself a boat" joke? And then, and then like not 5 minutes later, the other boat that was shooting like came close, and Corbett, the director, goes, "Hey, Jake, you have bought yourself a boat." And we both just loved it. It's so funny.
That's so good. Well, so when you started making this record, I know you said like, you know, it takes time and it kind of comes when it comes, but like, did you have a sort of clear idea of like what you wanted it to be about, or is it just sort of like a fluid process that's kind of happens as it happens?
I think when I make records, I try not to focus too much on on the bigger picture early on. Like I try and keep it pretty fluid. A lot of times the songs I write on the back half, like the second half of the batch of songs, tend to be like the more concise ones because I think then I do sort of have an understanding, even if I'm not like super cognizant of that. I try. I think it just that happens naturally. Like I get in the flow, and the last couple records I've made, the last few songs that I write end up being the singles. I guess Right Back to It wasn't, but some of the other ones are. And same with St. Cloud. Like I wrote Lilacs and Fire. Those are the last two songs I wrote for the record. So I feel like I get really focused the more I'm writing. A lot of times I don't even totally understand what the bigger narrative is until I'm like finished doing press and like I'm touring the record and I've talked about it enough that I've like unpacked what it's about a little bit more.
Yeah, well, like as you say, journalists are always looking to like put something in a box. Like
it's your job. It's that's okay. That's the job. So, and it is a lot of times doing interviews and answering like similar questions can help you as an artist kind of unpack it yourself and maybe you wouldn't otherwise.
I really love that lyric. You play the villain like a violin. That's Crime to the Heart, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that song.
So there's a couple songs on the record that I kind of had this approach. Like I was really thinking about just songwriting as like a craft a lot as I was making this record. And I kind of came up with this thing in my head that like a process of checking off like this song is done or the song isn't done or whatever. Something I was thinking about is I was like, a song of mine, it either needs to perfectly and succinctly describe, a really authentic experience that I've had, or it needs to be line for line perfect. So if a song feels like it's not really about something specific that's happened to me, then I have to really like make sure every single line feels like a perfect line of poetry to me. And so Crimes of the Heart is one of those songs. And so is Lone Star Lake. Those are the two on the record that they're sort of this like abstract writing experience. And if you ask me what they're about, it would be kind of hard for me to say. I actually don't know. It just kind of like was coming out of me. I was extra hard on myself to make sure that it felt like it was evoking something, even if it wasn't coming from like a direct experience.
I heard you talk a little bit about your feelings about the music industry. Like, seems from my perspective fucked in lots of ways, but like, yeah, how did that, like, your feelings about that kind of translate into the music?
I feel like the music industry has changed a lot. As I said, I keep talking about aging, and I'm 35. I'm not like that old. I'm sure there's so many people that like roll their eyes when I talk about it, but I've been doing this a long time and I feel very seasoned. The eras that I romanticize of the music industry, it looked really different than it looks now. I don't know. It's funny. Like I feel very like unjudgmental about how different people approach being an artist differently than I do. But I do sometimes occasionally feel a little like an outsider or something. So I think it's really about that, and just feeling like there are pressures from like all the powers that be to focus on a lot of things that have nothing to do with music as an artist. So, just sort of like it gave me the opportunity through some of these songs to sort of air some of that in a way that felt cathartic,
I know you don't really use social media too much, but I saw that you just started a Substack. Like, what appealed to you about that medium?
Substack felt like it would give me the opportunity to sort of share without, the scroll, which is really nice. And I love writing. It's really, I don't have like a purpose for writing that often, other than just to write on my own. So I just thought it might suit me a little bit better. So it's an experiment. It's new, but I'm really enjoying it so far.
I read that you're a fan of that book, The Artist's Way.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered like how that informs your kind of like creative process, if at all.
I do love The Artist's Way. I love Julia Cameron. She takes a 12-step approach, which I also like do 12-step programs. So I really appreciate that. Like the sort of spiritual approach to being an artist, I think is really cool. There's just like little nuggets of wisdom throughout that entire book. The morning pages thing is great. I've been doing a thing where I keep a little bit of like an audio diary. So rather than like put pen to paper, I will talk into my phone and let that kind of be my morning pages. So I think that's really great. I think like getting stuff out and externalizing whatever's going on inside is really helpful. And that's something she really advocates for.
You and Kevin did when Roe v. Wade was announced, you did a like benefit show, selection year. You know, you live in the South. Like, how are you feeling about like country and like everything?
I'm feeling stressed about the country. Yeah, majorly, majorly stressed. It's going to be a crazy year in America, and I know it's really a crazy time for international European politics as well. Kevin and I live in Kansas, and Kansas was a really interesting state to live in when the overturning of Roe v. Wade happened, because it was on the ballot after it got overturned. And Kansas has a Democrat as a governor, but it's a really like, it's like a purple state. There's like blue bubbles that are like, majorly populated, but then there's a lot of conservatives in the state as well. So it really could have gone either way. And it was one of the few states where, especially in the area, in that region, where abortion may still be able to be legal. So, we tried to hit the ground running as much as we could. And then we ended up, Kansas as a state ended up winning that, which was great.
If you want people to like, this is maybe too hard to say, but like take one thing away from the new record.
When I released St. Cloud, I learned a really good lesson, which was, when I wrote that record, obviously I was writing about this sort of individual experience I was having of getting sober and like learning how to live my life that way. I didn't want that to be like overly obvious, just because I don't think that that type of record would have hit me well, like something that was like very literally about sobriety. So I took like really special care to try and make it as like relatable, or like try to just take like a really poetic approach to describing those feelings. And when the record came out, obviously it was right around the time of lockdown, and I felt like the way that it landed on people was really interesting. Like, I feel like people who had never even thought about getting sober really connected with that record because of totally different feelings that they were having about lockdown or about whatever. So I really liked that. And so I was very conscientious as I was making this record of, obviously these are going to be songs about really personal experiences that I'm having, but I want to try and write this in a way that it can just land on people and it can mean for them whatever it means for them.